Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays and Vlogtober day 18. Today we are talking cemetery etiquette and magic. The things we're going to chat about today apply to graveyards as well, so I thought I would just get that distinction out of the way. First thing is that a graveyard is attached to a church and a cemetery is not. I always say cemetery because that is pretty much exclusively what I go to. There are not too many graveyards around here. It's very rare to see that actual yard attached to a church. There's just not the space for it in the city of Chicago. Tend to find those more in rural areas. So I do not go to very many of those, so I just use the term cemetery. Cemetery, magic, and etiquette pops up a lot this time of year. It's a popular place to visit during October and the Samhain season. There are a lot of Day of the Dead celebrations on November 1st that take place at cemeteries. So I thought it would be fun to chat just a little bit about that and about the etiquette that comes along with that if you want to visit a cemetery and specifically practice magic alongside that. The first important thing to note is that cemeteries can be associated with a particular religion. Not all of them are, but some are. And if you are not a part of that religion, you are probably not going to have as much success at that cemetery, and there might be different rules and regulations that you might not know about. For example, one of the things that I am going to mention a little bit later on is cemetery offerings and coins specifically, and that's a no-no if you go to a Jewish cemetery. So just be aware of what sort of religion is associated with that cemetery and whether or not you are a part of that. My dad is buried at a Catholic cemetery. Pretty much everyone in my family is at various Catholic cemeteries around the Chicagoland area. Specifically, we live very close, walking distance, to 3 cemeteries that are all by each other, which is St. Luke's, which, as you could imagine, is Catholic. There's also Montrose Cemetery, which is completely non-denominational, and Bohemian Cemetery, which was featured prominently in the movie U.S. Marshals. And it's also on the National Register of Historic Places. So I have a lot of cemeteries that I can just walk right into. And they have different energies and different reasons why I would want to go there. And those are separate from when I am actually going to visit the cemeteries where my family members are. So I think the most important place to start is to think about why you would even want to visit a cemetery. What's kind of the purpose? First, great way to acknowledge, remember, and honor death. We do not like to do that in our culture. We like to sort of forget that it exists, but it is an important part of life and the cycle that we are all a part of. And none of us really know what is going to happen to us, if anything, after we die. So that is scary and people don't like to think about it, but it is such an important facet. It's also a great place to express gratitude for life. Gratitude that you are alive. Gratitude that your loved ones lived the life that they did. Gratitude that your ancestors lived, because otherwise you would not even be here. And along with that, cemeteries are a great place to find peace. They are very quiet, and you often will find areas of the cemetery where you are not going to run into another living person for hours. So if you need time to be alone with your thoughts, to meditate, to read, to enjoy your own company, a cemetery can be a great place for that. Some people think of them as scary, spooky, haunted, but again, that's that scared association that our culture has with death. But they're really not. They are very peaceful places to be. They're a good place to connect with loved ones. So tomorrow's video is going to be about ancestors, altars, and working with ancestors. And an ancestor altar is a great place to connect with those loved ones. But a cemetery can be better for some people because it is just quieter and easier to talk to your deceased loved one, to hear their response and just generally feel closer to them. And it can be a good way to communicate with spirits in general. So whether you knew them in life or not, there are often spirits around a cemetery that want to communicate with you. So if you are interested in spirit work, guidance, maybe you have questions, maybe you just want to spend some time with spirits, that is a great place to go. And the last 2 on my list of why to visit a cemetery are, of course, the magical reasons. So first, there is spellcasting. If you are comfortable doing this in public, you can absolutely cast spells at a cemetery. And there's absolutely places even within a cemetery that you are not going to find people. So even if you are slightly uncomfortable, there are good chances, depending on where you pick, that you might not come across another person. So you could practice your spellcraft in peace. And then the last thing is gathering spell ingredients. And this is a bit of a touchy subject. I know graveyard dirt comes up a lot and the uses of graveyard dirt. Some people are very uncomfortable with it, but then in other cultures and traditions, it features prominently in spell work. So that is a determination that you're gonna have to make for yourself. Figure out how you feel about it. If you have any cultures and traditions associated with that, figure out what's going on there and make that call for yourself. But we will absolutely get into that. Let's get into etiquette and guidelines for visiting cemeteries. First, have your protections up. Cemeteries aren't inherently dangerous or spooky or, ghosts are gonna follow you home, but I have protections up anytime I leave the house. Many people visiting cemeteries like to cover their heads with some sort of veil, cast protective charms on their mode of transportation, like a car, wear protective amulets, whatever it is, just to keep yourself a little safer so energies can't latch onto you. Next, always follow the mundane rules of the cemetery. In more rural areas, these don't exist, but here in the city, there are absolutely gates and time limits, visiting hours. There is no visiting the cemetery after sunset here. Do so at your own risk, and I don't recommend it. But the mundane rules are there for a reason, and they are to keep the grounds and yourself safe. Not having any open flames is a big one. There are certain areas that have this rule and certain ones that don't. I personally don't light candles at any cemeteries. If I feel like I need a candle, I will use a battery operated one. I just feel like that's a really good way to start a fire. So if you are going to use candles, stay there until it completely burns out and then clean everything up. And speaking of cleaning everything up, cemeteries usually have some mundane rules about what can and cannot be left at a grave in terms of decorations or offerings. So be sure to know what those rules are, because sometimes if you leave things there and they are not within the guidelines, then the groundskeepers can just sweep them up and throw them out. You will never see them again. And I think this is mundane rule and magical rule, but just be respectful. Respect the graves, respect other live people that are there. If there are people there for a burial, if there are other people there visiting their loved ones, steer clear, let them have their space. I personally don't like walking on graves. I try very hard to walk the paths around them, definitely never on the headstones. But that's not necessarily an etiquette rule, just a personal guideline. But I think that's just good rules to follow in life, but in cemeteries and spirit work especially, is to just be respectful. When things go wrong with ancestors and spirits, it's usually because the person was not being respectful. And lastly, when you are done at the graveyard doing whatever it is you need to do, when you get home, it is often a good idea to cleanse. Some people don't find this necessary, but I do it just as a precaution, just to cleanse myself, my car, the clothes I was wearing, all of that. Now let's talk about that respect and actually stepping foot into a cemetery. Particularly if you are going there with magical intentions in mind, such as casting a spell there or collecting graveyard dirt. A lot of traditions believe that there is a guardian of every cemetery. Some believe that it is the spirit of the first person that was buried there. Others have a specific deity or general guardian that is the protector over cemeteries in general. And a great resource for this is Dorothy Morrison's book, Utterly Wicked. I love that book. It talks all about cemetery magic and graveyard dirt, all the things that you can do there, and specifically talks about the idea of the guardian and making an offering to the guardian when you come in. So if you are of that belief that there is a guardian, then it is a good idea to carry some coins and a little bit of wine in a small bottle and leave that at the entrance for the guardian. And like I said, at Jewish cemeteries, they don't like coins, so be sure to follow the traditions of wherever you are going. And then simply once you're inside the gates, present your offering and ask the guardian for permission to enter, and just let them know what it is you're planning on doing. If it's your first time visiting a particular cemetery, I wouldn't go in right off the bat asking for things or saying that you're there to cast spells or collect spell ingredients. Like any other spirit relationship, it is a working relationship. So you want to establish that relationship in the first place. That means not only making that offering when you come in, but also just generally spending time there, getting to know the spirits that are there, getting to know your ancestors that are there, appreciating the nature, maybe doing some cleanup. Grounds in a cemetery are usually pretty well kept, but there might be some graves that need extra care because nobody's been there in a while. It is just a nice gesture. A good way to pay your respects is to just clean up some of those graves. And once you have that relationship established, then you can come back and let that guardian know what it is that you are planning to do. If you get any sort of uneasy feeling, then that's probably your sign that they're not comfortable with what it is that you're wanting to do. And I would not recommend going ahead. Wait until you feel comfortable and you feel like you're getting a clear sign that they're like, okay, we trust you and you respect the cemetery. We're gonna allow whatever it is that you want to do. And like I said, there is some hesitancy around graveyard dirt. Graveyard dirt is dirt from the grounds of a graveyard. So it could be some dirt just like right by the entrance gate, and it could be from a particular grave. And this is something that I think you have to figure out for yourself and exercise caution. First of all, because graveyard dirt has been shown to have toxins in it that will leach from very old graves. So your own risk. But also graveyard dirt has a very dense energy, and there are a lot of great alternatives for it. So if you are not feeling comfortable with it, there's no reason that you have to use graveyard dirt in your practice. Many witches do not, and that's perfectly fine. But there are some cultures and traditions, such as Appalachian magic, hoodoo traditions, where graveyard dirt features very prominently. So if that is part of your culture and your traditional belief system, there is no right or wrong answer either way. It really is what you believe and what you feel comfortable with. If you feel like it would really help you in your spell work and you think that you've been respectful and you've gotten the permissions, then graveyard dirt can be incredibly helpful. It can be used for banishing, letting go, grief rituals, protection, ancestor work. There are a lot of options, but for me, I can easily work those spells within a graveyard and not have to take any of that dirt home to then complete those spells at home. I also have plenty of correspondences in the terms of herbs and crystals and oils that could be used in a working for any one of those things that would make that graveyard dirt unnecessary. And sometimes I don't need that dense, heavy energy that is associated with graveyard dirt. So when it comes to those protection and grief rituals, I am just more comfortable going to the cemetery itself and spending some time there and doing my spell work there with the energy surrounding there rather than bringing any of it home. The only dirt that I would feel comfortable collecting is the dirt from my own father's grave. It's just generally better when you know the person. There is a belief that you shouldn't take it for at least a year. It takes a year for them to really move on before you can call on them in ancestor work. Again, personal belief. But it has been almost 3 years, 6 months since my dad passed. So I would feel comfortable collecting dirt from his grave. And I would specifically collect dirt related to health spells because he was a pediatrician and a very good one. He was just always able to diagnose everything and even some really weird things. We had a lot of people at his retirement party and his last birthday party come up and tell me that they would be dead if it wasn't for my dad. So if I need a serious boost in a health spell, that is where I would bring in some graveyard dirt. Any health spells that I've had to do so far, I've been fine with just calling in my dad's energy through ancestor altar and some mementos of his, like you're going to see tomorrow, because we haven't had anything that was incredibly heavy and serious that has come up, thankfully. So smaller health spells have been just fine for that. But if something very serious were to happen that I would feel the need to call on that, that's the one grave that I would feel comfortable taking that dirt from and using it within my spell work. If I also felt that our home was particularly threatened, then graveyard dirt from one of your loved ones can be very helpful for that, to put around the borders of your home, but I don't feel that level of spell work is necessary for me yet. And graveyard dirt, on the more negative flip side, is often used for bindings and can bind two people together. And I have no desire to bind myself to anyone, not even my husband. Maybe my dog, but not with graveyard dirt. I do more negative and baneful magic, so no judgment for me on that front, just not personally something that I am interested in when it comes to that particular use of graveyard dirt. That's everything that I have to share on this video for Vlogtober Day 18 and graveyard dirt, cemetery magic, cemetery etiquette. If you have one near you, highly recommend heading out there soon for a nice fall walk through the cemetery, or bring a book and sit and read for a while. If you aren't a regular cemetery visitor, you will just be amazed at how beautiful and peaceful a place it really is. And I will see you tomorrow for Vlogtober Day 19 and sharing my ancestor altar.